Hey everyone, it's Alyce, and it's time for our June mid-month wrap-up. While I was planning my June TBR, I said that we were considering potentially low-key participating in Maddie from Book Browsing blog's Whateverthon, and that ended up turning into quite intensely participating, and so not only have we hardly read anything that was actually on our Hook a Duck TBR this month, but I'm going to talk about the book, talk about what I thought about it, and I'm also going to share how many Whateverthon points it counted for us, and then when I do my June end of the month wrap up, I can just give like a point total of what we were on during our mid-month, and then update it, and then share what our points were looking like at the end of June as well. So hopefully that makes some kind of sense, because we were not planning on taking part in this, and I'm just kind of fumbling it as I go along, just picking anything up and being like, does this match any of the prompts? Can I fit this in somewhere? So what we'll do is we will tell you what books we've been reading, share thoughts and points, and if they happen to work with any ducks, I'll let you know, because that's the whole point of this really, is to do my Hook a Duck ducks, but it's not really happening at the moment. I'd also just like to apologise for the fact that, number one, I sound ridiculously nasal because I'm having a wonderful summer cold, because that's what always happens to me. It gets to the hottest day of the year and I come down with a terrible cold. So Nasal Alyce is here to stay for a few videos, I'm afraid, and I'd also like to apologise for how sweaty I am, because I've had my fan off for less than 5 minutes and I already feel like I'm melting, and we are 2.5 minutes into filming, so by the end of this video I'm just going to be a puddle, and I'm sorry, but that's what happens when you're British and summer comes out of nowhere and slaps you with its big sweaty fist. So, there we go, the disclaimers are out of the way, the information has been given, let's talk about the books we've read this month. So the first up is Sword in the Stars by Cory McCarthy and A.R. Capetta. This is the sequel to Once in Future, which I read last month. I was really excited about picking it up, and I ended up hating it and giving it 2 stars. Not the best end to this duology. So it's hard to talk about my problems with Sword in the Stars without ruining the first book in the series, so I'm not going to go too into depth in this one. I have already written a full series review on my blog. I will link that down in the description if you would like to see more of my thoughts on this one. But my main issue is that where the first book incorporated the queer aspects very naturally, the second book feels like it's hammering it home, and it's really, I don't want to say preachy, but that's exactly what it is. So, in the first book, we're following this cast of characters. Ari is the 42nd reincarnation of King Arthur. She has a girlfriend. She has a non-binary friend. In this universe, they identify as fluid. There's a demi-boyfriend. Merlin is gay. So it's a very nice, well-rounded LGBTQ plus cast of characters. However, in the second book, they have magically gone back in time to Camelot. So back in Arthur's times, being LGBTQ plus would have been less open. People would have not shared that as easily as they do now. It would have been kind of frowned upon. But it's like they want to make it sound as though Arthurian times would have actually been really free and easy and happy with anything. Like, one of the characters makes the first gay-straight alliance, and I know that it's meant to be like people from the future going back to the past and making positive impacts to change the lives of the people there, but if that had a positive impact, that would have meant that gay rights would have been brought forward. So people, like LGBTQ plus rights, would have been introduced earlier because of those changing beliefs, and it just didn't come across very realistic, because all the way through that, like, oh, we can't do anything because of the butterfly effect, we can't have an impact on this, we can't mess up this aspect of the timeline, but then all of a sudden you're starting the first gay straight alliance and you're saying that you're going to do loads for like LGBTQ plus folk in the Arthurian times, and that just didn't feel authentic. There's also some very preachy bits about the way that women were treated back in the Arthurian times, and I agree that women are not represented the best in the original Arthurian lore. But the problem is that the people who would need to hear this would have needed to hear it in the first book. They aren't the kind of people that are going to pick up book 2 in the series. So it's like they've got it the wrong way around. In the first book, everything is just smooth and breezy and easily accepted. There's no questioning of people's pronouns. There's no questioning of people's different sexualities. It's just all intrinsically kind of accepted. But in the second book, everything is hammered home a bit harder. And the people who need to hear those messages won't be the people who pick up the second book once they've seen how relaxed people are in the first book, if that makes any kind of sense. It's very hot, my brain is melting. But that was one of my other problems. And also there's the fact that, like, one of the characters is pregnant and they keep referring to their baby as a she. And they're like, yeah, it's going to be a girl, I don't want it to be a boy. Because in Arthurian legend, there is Arthur's son, Mordred, who kills Arthur. So the character is determined that they aren't going to be the one that gives birth to the son who will cause the downfall, effectively. But then when the baby is born and it has male genitalia, they're like, oh, well, maybe it's trans, or maybe it'll identify as fluid. This is like an hour-old baby. You're not worrying about the fact that the baby is, like, healthy, or that you're healthy because you've just given birth in a lake in the middle of the Arthurian times with no kind of midwives, no healthcare, no sanitary systems at all. And yet you're just like, oh, well, sucks that it's a guy. Like, let's hope that it's trans or fluid. Not the right way to have that discussion. Not the right way to go about it. As somebody who is a mother, I just think that's disgusting. I would have hated it whether it had been like them wishing that the girl was a boy, whether it was them wishing that the kind of boy was a girl. I'm not a fan of gender reveal parties. I don't like that whole obsession with babies' genitalia. We found out our kids' genders when they were in me, and we didn't make a massive song and dance about it because I just find that really bizarre. And so for this character to be like, ooh, I really hope the baby comes safely because we're in Arthurian times. God damn, it's a boy. God damn it. Let's hope they change their gender when they're older. It just gave me really, really wiggy vibes, and I didn't realise how much it had pissed me off until it got to the end of the book, and I was still so fixated on that, because it's just one throwaway comment in, like, the midway point. But it ruined the rest of it for me, and I hated it. I absolutely hated it, and, like, the way that it all wraps up as well, it's all just like, yeah, not the one for me, but that was the main thing. Yeah, so two stars for this one. When it comes to Whateverthon, Sword in the Stars got me 300 points. So I got 100 points from finishing the book, 100 points because one of the authors was LGBTQ+. Actually, both of the authors are, because this is a married couple writing these novels. I can't remember how the rest of the point breakdown worked. I thought I got 300 for it, but I might not have. Oh, I got 25 points because it was the team genre, because it's sci-fi and that doesn't fit into any of the other genres. I'm on the Comrades of Chaos, so we just get basically any genre that isn't one of the other teams. And I honestly can't see where I got the other points. I put that the colours reminded me of the non-binary flag because it has violet, grey, black and white. I did also put that it was my team colour because the violet in some bits is like really light and it's kind of pinky, but I thought that the team colour was basically anywhere on the pink to purple spectrum, and I've since been told that it's just pink, so I did cheat for those 25 points, but it's fine. And I also got the points for it being out of my comfort zone because I don't read a lot of sci-fi, specifically Arthurian sci-fi retellings. So it was 300 points. I was not lying. I just got myself confused a little bit because of the heat. That's going to be my excuse for everything that messes up in this video. I'm sorry. Book number 2 is a less ranty one, and that is Today, Tonight, Tomorrow by Rachel Lynn Solomon. So I read this through the Riveted Lit free reads, and I really enjoyed it. So it's set in one day. A girl and her arch nemesis at school, they end up teaming up at this pre-graduation end-of-year game called Howl. They have to go across the town. It's Seattle that it's set in, and they have to explore Seattle and go and get pictures of all of these things on like this treasure hunt list, and then be the first ones back to the school, and then they come in $5,000 for their kind of college fees. And it is so adorably cute. Rowan and Neil, my whole heart just melts. Like, it's quite clearly going to be an enemies to lovers romance, because literally on the front cover there's them sitting really far apart and then them sitting slightly closer together and then her with her legs in his lap. So it's very, very predictable, but the way that it gets there, it is such a slow burn enemies to lovers, and I genuinely was weeping at one point. I was just like so emotional about these characters. It's taken me about 3 months to read this. I did load this up during the 25 days of free books that Riveted Lit do in December, and I've just had it open on my phone the whole time, and I've just been flipping backwards and forwards and reading like a few chapters and then just abandoning it for months. And I wish now that I had just dedicated some time to reading this in one go, because it was gorgeous. I want to read more of Rachel Lynn Solomon's writing because it was so sweet. There's just so much that I love about this book. I learned a lot about Seattle. I loved the way that it jumped from, there's like different ways of storytelling through it. So you get like a letter from Neil, and you get an email from Rowan to her parents, and you get texts between them, and then you get like a report from one of the school teachers about like a time they got into a fight in class. So it laces these parts of their history through this overnight story of them falling in love, and it's just so nicely layered. So it doesn't take you out of the fact that like this isn't one night story, but it just adds that depth that some stories that are set in 24 hours are really lacking. And yeah, I cannot rate this one more highly. It's gorgeous and I love it. For this one, I did only get 125 points from Whateverthon, so I got 100 points for finishing the book, and I got 25 points because the main character, Rowan, is half Mexican, so it's people of colour rep. I gave Today, Tonight, Tomorrow 4 stars. How could I forget to give the star rating? That's like the most important thing. There's quite clearly too much going on this month. The next book I'd like to talk about is Rose Interrupted by Patrice Lawrence. This was a 2.5 star book for me, which is gutting because that's the lowest I've ever rated any of Patrice Lawrence's novels, and I've read all of them. But there's just something about this one that doesn't gel with me right. So basically, Rose Interrupted is about a girl and her brother, Rose and Rudder. They have just left the Pilgrims, which I don't know whether it's an actual religion. It's something I need to look into. But it sounds quite similar to the Jehovah's Witnesses. So they aren't allowed to use like the internet or anything. They have to go to specific schools. They're quite segregated. They disbelieve everything that is taught by the worldly wise, and they must follow the teachings of the Pilgrim leaders to be able to ascend when the clean slate comes. And Rose and Rudder are decommissioning, which means that their mother has left the Pilgrims and they are adjusting to being one with the worldly wise. Rose has a list of all these different things that she wants to do to become one of the worldly wise, including like listening to music and being inappropriate with boys. And Rudder just really wants to get back to the Pilgrims because he's left his dad behind, and it's all he's ever known. I think he's either 9 or 10, so he's a lot younger than Rose, and it's all he's ever known, and he's the reason that they had to leave in the first place because he loves Harry Potter. And his book gets burnt because they find it and it's one of the forbidden texts. So his book gets burnt and he tries to rescue it. Social services quite clearly get involved because he has very terrible burns on his hands. But he blames himself for his sin of enjoying Harry Potter, causing them to have to leave the Pilgrims. And all he wants to do is atone for that sin. My main problem with this one is that it's just too long. We jump between Rose's perspective and Rudder's perspective, which is brilliant because it's great to see both sides of the argument. Somebody who wants to leave the Pilgrims and somebody who really wants to go back. The justifications between each of those, like why she hates the Pilgrims and why he wants to be with them. How deeply their feelings are in those two ends of that same argument. Those are all brilliant aspects that are so vital and so important because so often it's so easy to be like somebody from outside of that situation looking at it and being like, ooh, that's quite clearly like inappropriate, like that's not how most people think. But when you've actually been brought up with that belief, that would be like completely indoctrinating and you wouldn't be able to see the negative sides of it very easily. I know people who have left the Jehovah's Witnesses in real life and they say that that's like a genuine thing. It's like you feel that like pull to go back always because you always feel like you've done the wrong thing, even if you can see like logically that some of their beliefs are not appropriate. So I loved seeing the two binary oppositions there, but my main issue is that it's just so clunky, because some of it you get Rose talking about how Rudder feels, and then you get Rudder talking about how Rose is feeling, but we're seeing both of their perspectives, so we don't need those ruminations from each of them. There's like lists lists that break it up of, like, Rose's lists of, like, things that she's done that are, like, decommissioning since leaving the Pilgrims. But because we've seen a lot of those things play out, we don't need that repetition with those lists. That slows the plot down dramatically. It took me 6 months to finish this one, 7 months. I started this at, like, the beginning of November, and I read half it in a day, and I just didn't feel the need to pick it up again. I've decided to finish it off now, but I kind of wish I'd just DNF'd it because I don't really feel like I got anything from this book. I don't know if that's because cults and religious organisations really interest me. I've read a lot of what I affectionately refer to as bad cult books because half of them are terrible. But the ones that get it right, get it so perfectly right. One that I would especially recommend would be After the Fire by Will Hill. Also The Girls by Emma Cline does a really good job of it as well. But the problem is that this one doesn't hit the same marks as those ones, and so it just didn't live up to my standards. So I hate giving this a 2.5 because I really do like Patrice Lawrence's writing, but this was one of the misses for me. Rose Interrupted got me 175 points on Whateverthon because I got 100 points for finishing the book. I got 25 points for it being mental health representation because of Rudder's PTSD from his burning. I got 25 points for this being the team colour because there's lots of pink around the outside of Rose, and obviously the title literally has Rose in it. What's pinker than that? And I got 25 points for people of colour rep because Rose and Rudder are both mixed race. The fourth book I'd like to talk about this month is Love Me Not by Holly Smale. This is the third and final book in the Valentine's series, and this was a 5-star, which is brilliant because I loved book 2. I struggled with the first half of book 1 because Hope's perspective is very naive and very innocent, and it's too sugary sweet for me, and I love sugar. I am like the most sweet tooth person you will ever meet, and I couldn't stomach it. But I pushed my way through and I really loved the way that it ended, so I gave the first book 4 stars. But Far From Perfect and Love Me Not have both been 5-star reads for me. So if you haven't started reading these books yet, you need to, because they're perfect. So The Valentines follows a famous family called the Valentines. There are the 3 sisters and the brother Max. And they have all the eyes on them because they are the daughter of Oscar royalty, basically, and the grandmother also has Oscars, their great-grandmother has Oscars. They're very much like one of the big acting families. And in Love Me Not, we get Mercy's story. Mercy has been my favourite character from the beginning. I find her so interesting. And I can't go into details about the plot or about anything because obviously it is the third book in the series and a lot gets revealed during the first 2 that affects the way that this third book goes. But I will just say, I love that there is an author who is focusing on the way that different people deal with grief. The differences, even in the same family, between how people deal with grief. And the fact that often as a young person dealing with grief, if your parents are also grieving, it can be horrendously difficult because you need their support, but then they might not necessarily have the support to give you. There's this beautiful quote about saying that sometimes you need other people's pain. Like, you might not feel like you can carry other people's pain, but by carrying other people's pain, it can really help you. And I thought that was a beautiful quote. I was nearly in tears. Nearly in tears. And I don't know, there's just everything about this book. Everything. It's quite long. It's over 500 pages, and I thought that might be a bit too long. It does get repetitive at points, but I think it's so important because it shows the way that you can think you're over grief and you can think you're moving on, but then it pulls you back down. And you have to go through those cycles of slowly getting better. Like, each time you go from like a 1 to a 5, back down to a 2. But then you might go from a 2 to an 8 and then back down to a 3. But you're really slowly like building up and you're slowly improving your mental health and the way that you're dealing. And it's just beautiful. I thought it was such a great look at grief, and I would highly recommend this book and this series to anybody because I thought it was going to be really cute, fluffy, contemporary, but they are so hard-hitting. They're so much deeper than that. For Whateverthon, Love Me Not got me 175 points. I got 100 points for finishing the book. I got 25 points for the mental health representation of Mercy having her depression. I got 25 points because it had pink all over the cover, and I got 25 points because this was a 5-star prediction because I knew I was going to love this book, and it was just as good as I thought it was going to be. The 5th book I'd like to talk to you about today is In the Ravenous Dark by A.M. Strickland. This is a standalone YA/adult fantasy novel. I'm not quite sure where it's trying to sit. The main character is 19, so it is on the upper end of YA, but it definitely feels like it's trying to be more adult. And obviously Illumicrate kind of feature both, so it's hard to tell. But I'm still conflicted on this one. I've already written a full-length review of it, so I will link that down below. But I'm still conflicted on how I feel about it, because I just had such high hopes for it, and I wanted to love this more than I did. But I think basically my whole issue with this stems from the way that McCarthy announced that it was the book that they were featuring. So they announced that this was a book. I'm just going to say it, because if you're interested in this book, it's probably something that you already know, and then I'll share with you why it kind of hampered my enjoyment of it. If it also ends up hampering your enjoyment of it, I'm sorry, but there is no other way for me to talk about this. But basically they announced that it was a main character who had 2 love interests. So a lot of people were jumping on being like, oh, not a love triangle, I'm fed up with a love triangle. And people were like, no, it's a polyamorous relationship. Now that's ace. We like to see polyamorous rep. We don't see it very often. I've only read one other book with polyamorous rep, and it was a hot mess. And I was so excited to see a polyamorous couple fantasy realm it up. And unfortunately, no. The polyamorous aspect comes into the book at about 75%. So the whole time I'm like, but where's the polyamory? And I knew which characters were going to get together. It was pretty obvious. And I knew that they were going to end up being this relationship of 3. But it just didn't happen. And then I was like, oh, maybe I'm thinking of the wrong book. Maybe I've remembered like a different month of Illumicrate. I was like, no, it's definitely in the Ravenous Dark. And there are polyamorous discussions. So there's this beautiful quote from Jaffa, who is a non-binary character. Their father is their mother? Their father has a daughter with their mother's sister, if that makes sense. So their father had an affair with another woman. But Jaffa basically says that it doesn't matter, because if they were all comfortable with it, and if that was what made them happy, like, why shouldn't we be beholden but to more than one? I don't know, I can't remember the quote off the top of my head, but it was like a really lovely way of looking at it. It wasn't like, oh no, I hate my half-sister because of the fact that my father had an affair. It was like, oh well no, like why not? Like, as long as everybody was consenting adults and they were all aware of what was going on, then love is love is love. And I liked that discussion in it. I thought that was good. I've never seen a discussion like that on the page before. But unfortunately, because of the fact that you're constantly waiting for that relationship, it means that when it does eventually happen, it kind of feels like a bit like, oh, finally. And it ruins the effect a little bit. I don't think it helps that it's a standalone. Like, I like standalone novels because sometimes it's nice to not have to worry about when the sequel comes out or remembering all the events that go on to pick up the sequel, but this could have really done with a sequel. There's just so much going on, and the ending wraps everything up so quickly, but there's still so much potential for this world and for these characters, and I would have liked to have seen them go further. I also think that there's an enemies to lovers romance in here that just turns around a little too quickly, so it doesn't feel very authentic to me. The characters are kind of like at each other's throats, and they have a lot of reasons to bond, but it feels like they're not really doing it, and then all of a sudden they're like, I love you! Well, slow down. So it just felt a bit inauthentic to me. I don't know if that's because it's a standalone, so they needed to kind of like get to the point a bit faster, but I didn't love that. I did, however, like the female-female relationship in here. I thought that the relationship between Rowan and the female character, I'm trying not to give spoilers, it's pretty obvious when you start reading it, but I don't want to give spoilers because that is like a big part of it, like who she ends up with. I liked the relationship between them. I thought the dynamic was very cool, and I would love to read more from them in the future. But also talking about the enemies to lovers romance, there is like this really rushed sex scene that just feels completely unnecessary, and it threw me out of the story, and I'm still baffled on why it needed to be in there. Like, I don't mind, like, casual sex in books. I don't think that there always needs to be a reason. But it just felt so out of the blue, and it just literally came out of nowhere. I'm so funny. But, yeah, I wasn't a fan of that. I love the world, though. This is set in, like, a Grecian-inspired fantasy world called Thonopolis. And they all wear, like, chitons, and I don't know if I'm saying any of these words right, by the way. I should probably have looked that up. But they were... forgot what they're called, Himatians. So it's all very Grecian, and it just made me want to get on like a maxi dress and like wander around with some like braided belts and some braids in my hair. I loved the vibe from the whole book. Obviously love the design, because this is like so beautiful. This is exactly my aesthetic, like flowers and blood and skulls. I liked the way that the two magic systems were intertwined. I thought they were described brilliantly, if a little rushed because it was a standalone. But I liked the kind of interaction between the two magic systems. And so there are blood mages who need to have like a spirit guardian paired with them to help control their magic. And that whole dynamic I loved. So it was a bit of a conflicting one, because I really cared about the characters, but I didn't think that their development was necessarily the most authentic, because it felt rushed. And I liked the world and the plot, but it felt rushed. So I ended up settling on 3.5 stars for this one. Tempted by 3, tempted by 4, went for 3.5. I just really, really wish this had been the first book in a series, because I think if it had been eked out a little bit more, if we'd really gotten a slow burn on that enemies to lovers, and we'd still had some of the events from the end, like the fallout of those, still to come, that would have been sublime. That being said, I think A.M. Strickland could become a new favourite author of mine, so I'm definitely going to be picking up more of their work in the future. For Whateverthon, in the Ravenous start, got me 275 points, so A.M. Strickland is a queer author, so I got 100 points from that. I got 100 points from finishing the book. I got 25 points for our team colour being on the cover, because even though it's majority black, this pink here on the font is exactly the same shade as the Comrades of Chaos. So I'm counting it. I also counted it for 25 points for Out of My Comfort Zone, because I don't read a lot of standalone fantasy, probably because I have problems with standalones, apparently. I'm like, this doesn't need to be a series. This standalone needs to be a series. You can't make me happy. And I also got 25 points because I hauled that one in the last year, because as I said, this was in Anonymous Crate, and this was in Anonymous Crate in April. So I will link the book box battle down below for this one if you would like to see it. And if you would like to see the next book I'm going to talk about, The Prison Healer by Lynette Noni, because this was in the same book box battle. Because look at me, actually reading the books that are coming in my book boxes, actually taking part in those book box read-alongs, even if this was meant to be 8 days and it took me 2.5 weeks. Yeah, it's the 14th. It's taken me 15 days to read an 8-day read-along, and this was meant to be a week, and I think it took me 3 weeks. So I'm not reading with them, but I'm trying to. I will get better at read-alongs, I promise. But The Prison Healer by Lynette Noni, I literally finished this about an hour ago. Still not sure how I'm feeling about it. I'm giving it 3 stars. Might potentially bump it up to 3.5. Because when I finished it, I said to Sean, I feel about this exactly the same way that I felt about Red Queen by Victoria Aveyard. And so I was going to give it the same rating. And then I went on Goodreads and was like, gave Red Queen a 3. Perfect. It's a 3. And then I realised in the little like comments on my review I'd put more like a 3.5. But this doesn't feel like a 3.5 to me. This feels like a solid 3. So The Prison Healer follows a girl called Kiva. She is the prison healer. So there's lots of scenes set in the infirmary. There's lots of her doing like healy stuff with these patients, and she's in prison because her dad was accused of being a rebel, and so they were accused of treason against the crown. She got arrested along with him, and then he passed away, and she took over his role as the prison healer, and she's now been in there for 9 years, and she's still waiting for her family to come and rescue her. And basically the rebel queen ends up getting put in the prison, and they're like, hey, like, rebel queen's here. Like, oh, the rebels, we've got their queen. This is like, and she's like, oh great, the rebels. Well, we got accused of being rebels, and now the rebel queen's here. Great, I've got to treat her. She's a patient. I'm not going to hold the fact that she's the rebel queen against her. I'm just going to treat her like I would any other patient. But in the rebel queen's clothing, there is a note folded up that says, stay alive, don't let her die, we are coming. So Kiva's like, my family, they are finally coming for me. They are using their time wisely, and they've bided their time for 9 years to wait to get me. but they're on their way. I'm going to be free soon. I just need to keep this woman alive. But because she is the rebel queen, she has to face the trial by ordeal. I think it's called Ordeal of the Trial. Some kind of ordeal. And she has to face the trial by air, water, earth, and fire. I've done that in completely the wrong order. Air, fire, water, and earth. And if she survives all 4 of the trials, then she can go free. But Tilda's really, really ill. Tilda is the rebel queen's name. She's really ill. She's, like, unconscious. So Kiva's like, look, it would be remiss of me as a healer to let this person do these trials while they are in this state, so I will be their champion. And chaos ensues from there. So... where to start with this one? I shouldn't have filmed this right after finishing it because I'm still, like, up in the air, as I said. But my problem with The Prison Healer is that I predicted everything in it. Like, literally everything. It is the most paint-by-numbers YA fantasy that you will ever read. I'm trying not to count that against it in my rating, because obviously this is the problem when you're an adult reader reading YA. If you've read YA in the past, you'll find it predictable, because it's all pretty much the same story over and over again, especially when it comes to YA fantasy. Like, sounds harsh, but you'll see what I mean if you read this book after reading a lot of other YA fantasy. There's a lot of the things in it that I've seen done before. Not necessarily done better, but I've seen before, and they're trying to be like shock reveals and secrets and twisty turnies, but I just kind of saw them all coming. I don't mean kinda, I literally saw them all coming. I said to Sean, maybe Beep's Beep, and Sean was like, maybe. Maybe Beep is Beep's Beep. Yeah. Maybe Beep is Beep's Beep, and Beep is Beep. Yeah. Even down to, like, the ordeals. Like the fire one. Probably going to be in the crematorium, innit? Yeah, it was. No, Alyce, no. Maybe the earth one. Or Beep. Beep. Yeah, of course it was. And there's, like, Sean hates it because there's this bit at the end that does, like, this thing that he hates. So Sean hates it when the character knows something and they, like, hide it from you. It makes sense in this instance because this isn't first person, this is third person. So we aren't in Kiva's head, we're just following Kiva. So she doesn't have to tell us what she knows. But I could tell, and Sean was like, oh, I feel really cheated, because she knew, and she didn't tell us. Like, she didn't need to, because it's not first person, but Sean was like, it's done that thing that I hate. And, yeah, so Sean's not happy on this one either. I think he said he's giving it a 2-star. He'll probably pop his rating up on the screen. The longer he sits on it, the lower his rating will get. So it's probably going to be a 1-star by the time I'm telling you about this. But, yeah. I enjoyed the writing. Very, very fast-paced. So speedy. And for someone who has been having bad brain times recently, you wouldn't guess that by the fact that we finished 6 books this month, but also I did start 4 of them. 4 of them I started last month. So, did these even count as being read in June? Who knows? But as someone who has been having a bad brain struggle with the concentration, the fact that I managed to read this as quickly as I did, and I was, like, reading huge chunks at a time and I was really enjoying it. We finished the last 100 pages just today. I can't remember the last time we read 100 pages in a day. Not for a good couple of weeks. We've been, like, scraping our way up to 10%. Possibly, like, 5% on one title, 5% on another, because I like to read 10% a day. So we've been, like, hardly reading anything in a big chunk. So 20% of this in a day, I'm impressed with that. That proves that it's got a quick pace and it's easy to digest. And it's very pleasantly written. This is well written YA fantasy. If you are somebody who likes YA fantasy and you like it being quite formulaic and you like having the same tropes and you like having the same kind of plots, then definitely pick this one up, because some people love that. Some people love the tropey stuff. Some people love being able to guess all of the reveals, and they think that that makes it like their new favourite book. So I can see why this is getting such great reviews. I just like being kept on the edge of my seat and a bit more surprised, and that didn't do this for me. This didn't do that for me. My words are all in the wrong order. That being said, liked the characters. The character of Tip is amazing. Rooting for him, loving him till the death. Nari's really interesting. I was spot on about her motivations from the beginning, but they kept me engaged because I was second guessing whether I'd got that right. The other kind of reveals, I wasn't second guessing because I was convinced, because I just knew. I don't know how, I just knew, but I did. But that being said, I'm still really excited for the sequel. I'm probably more excited for The Gilded Cage now than I was before I finished this one, because everything I thought was going to happen and everything I thought was going to get revealed has already been revealed in this book. I have no idea what's going to happen next, and I'm hooked. I am going to gobble up the next one, and it might end up being predictable, and it might end up not doing it for me, but I'm going to gobble up book 3 as well. You better believe it, because, like, this has been a solid 3-star, and a 3-star rating is not a bad rating. A 3-star is me saying this is not a new favourite for me, but I can still really recommend it, and I can still tell you that it's a good book. It just wasn't the one for me, because personally I don't like when they're that formulaic. But as I said, some people love that. That's okay. You do you. But what I would say is that this is a very promising start to the series. I am excited to see what happens next. I have no idea what's going to happen next, and October can't come soon enough, especially because it will be a little bit cooler, so I won't be melting every time I speak to you. Yeah, 3 stars for The Prison Healer, but a solid, good start to a series. And also, I gave the first book in the Red Queen series 3 stars, and now I'm 3 books in, and each one of them is getting better. So the same might happen here. Like, book 3 might end up becoming my favourite series ender of all time, and I will look back on this when I finish book 3. And hopefully I'll be right. Hopefully. We can cross our fingers. So, The Prison Healer got me 175 points. I got 100 points for finishing it. I got 25 points because it has my team's colour on the cover. Can you see pink on this cover anywhere? No, because I was using the normal cover when I was looking it up, and that's got pink flowers, and the Fairy Leap version has yellow flowers. So, mildly cheating, but the Fairy Leap version does have pink foiling under the dust jacket. That's still my team's colour. I'm not cheating, honestly. I also put this as a TBR game prompt because this is the only Hook and Up book that we have read this month so far. This was my recently purchased Dealer's Choice book because I know I needed to read it for the Fairy Leap read along. So this gets me 25 points for being a TBR game book, and it also gets me 25 points because it was recently purchased, because I hauled it within the last 12 months, because I hauled it in April. Well, April's book boxes. So, that's it for today's mid-month wrap-up. A mixed bag. A 2, a 3.5, a 3, a 5. We've been around the world. We've seen a million faces. We've read 6. We've read 6 books in 2 weeks, and we're feeling good about it. Whether I will finish anything else before the end of the month for Whateverthon, who knows? Let me just quickly add up how many points I'm on so far. I am 3/4 of the way through my target. My goal I'd set was 8. And I'm pretty sure you get an extra 500 for every one you add on. So I'm already on 1,500 points just straight off the bat. So for Whateverthon, I'm currently on 2,725 points. I am not upset about that. Whether I will get any more points remains to be seen, but we do have quite a lot of books that we're meant to read for Hook It Up before the end of the month, so let's hope we get at least a couple more of those read. Hopefully make our goal, because also if you get your 8-book goal, then every book after that counts for 200 points, so we would be getting double the points just for finishing a book. That would be awesome. But yeah, we'll let you know how it goes when it gets to the end of June. If you are also taking part in Whateverthon, feel free to share some of the books that you've read down below, share how many points you've already got. If you're also on the Comrades of Chaos, sup homies, shout yourselves out down below and I'll subscribe to any of you, and like, let's all support each other. Let's be supportive comrades. I like that. Yeah, thank you for watching this video. If you would like to subscribe, we'd be super duper grateful. We post the videos every Tuesday, Thursday and Saturday, so we will have another one for you in a couple of days, hopefully with less sweating and less brain melt. But we can't guarantee that here, so bring an umbrella in case you've got to avoid these droplets. Like this if you liked it, and we will see you again in a couple of days. Bye! Just gotta get my notebook because I can't remember what my ducks even bloody were. Sorry, Sean. Oh, my calculator's uninstalled itself. Why would that happen? I mean, because I have no space on my phone, but Let me go get my other phone for the calculator. Oh no. Oh no. Bring an umbrella for your droplets. Oh my god, I'm so cringy.